Good day. My name is Paul O'Gara. Today I'd like to speak to you about a book called The Outsider. Well, it's called The Outsider in Great Britain, and it's called The Stranger in America. I don't know who took it upon themselves to be contrary, but well, there you have it. I suppose it's called The Stranger in America because it's called L'étranger in French, so I don't know. Anyway, for argument's sake, let's call it The Outsider, seeing as my copy is called The Outsider by Albert Camus. Once again, Albert Camus, but in fact it's Camus because he's French, so we call him Camus. That's his name. Okay, well, the book was written in 1942. We don't really know why he called it The Outsider. There are various theories. One is that because he was a pied noir, which is an Algerian, a French Algerian of French descendants born in Algeria. That's what pied noir. Living in Algeria, so he was an outsider. I don't think that's it. The other theory is that because of his very individualistic nature. And the third theory is the logical one. Camus made it quite clear that he considered this book to be of absurdist philosophy. And if anything, he was an outsider because he didn't fit in, he didn't conform to society. To the society at the time, and that's why he was an outsider. Camus was born in 1913 to a very poor family. In fact, he was born to, his father went to war, to fight in World War I, and died, and so he was left at the tender hands of his mother, who worked her fingers to the bone, cleaning and what have you to bring him up. She was deaf. So they were consequently a poor family. He received the Nobel Prize in 1957 and died in 1960. When he received the Nobel Prize, his mother learnt of it when some neighbours brought her the telegram on which she was being notified officially by the Nobel Prize organization that her son had won the Nobel Prize, been awarded the Nobel Prize, and they had to read it to her because she was illiterate. To her, obviously, reflect what a marvel for this woman, what a sense of accomplishment for a son to reach such heights, and they were heights indeed for a man who had come from the lowest, from the most poor working areas of Algeria. Camus was a champion of individual rights. He opposed colonization in Algeria by the French and generally. As a journalist, he argued for the empowerment of Algerians in politics and labor. It's quite a touchy subject, really, but that France had a chance to retain Algeria. France should never have lost Algeria. I mean, in fact, France decided that Algeria would be part of France as opposed to a colony, and everything seemed fine. Algerian soldiers went to fight on France's behalf in the world, in the Second World War. But the Algerian politicians were constantly asking for equal status, which never happened. And then to bring things to a head, there was an uprising at a place called Sétif, sort of Islamic, communist, minor uprising, but there was a bloody massacre by the French paratroops, which Sétif is what really sparked off the Algerian the Algerian War for Independence. there's a fantastic book on the war for independence, which I'll mention another time. Now, this thing about existentialism, Camus himself made it quite clear that this novel was an absurdist novel because this man's treatment by the system, a system to which he did not conform, was absurd. And in fact, absurdism came at a time when, after the World War, so in France there were many situations. You imagine that in a war-ravaged country like France at the time, there were so many situations which were just completely ridiculous and absurd. And this is why the absurdist philosophy became so popular. In fact, Camus rejected to an extent Kierkegaard's, the Danish philosopher's existentialist philosophy when he tried to apply it to his books. I mean, admittedly, in Sisyphus, which is a later work of Camus, existentialism and absurdism go hand in hand in this novel, but the outsider is strictly an absurdist novel, even though it's widely referred to as existentialist. The story of the book basically is Mersault is an ordinary young man who lives in Pied Noir, Algeria. His mother dies and he travels to her funeral. He takes a day off from work. It's quite, in fact, his mother had, he had lived with his mother for quite some time, and then they had little to say to each other, and he could no longer afford to keep her, so he put her in a nursing home. And then she died, and he went to the funeral, and after all this time passed and they hadn't been together and what have you, obviously he wasn't that emotional. It was something that had happened, his mother's death, and he didn't ask for the coffin to be opened. He didn't cry. He smoked a cigarette. He drank coffee. And then, to crown it all, on his return, he goes to the beach for a swim. He meets a girlfriend, and they take up a relationship. They sleep together. She leaves for work, and he spends a lethargic day on the balcony. But all his actions subsequent to his mother's death are what is held against him when later he's judged. What happens is a neighbor draws him into a situation in which at the end, because a series of conflicts develop, and he finishes up killing a man, but there's no premeditation, there's no, it just happens, and a lot of it, Mersault himself justifies it by the sun being too hot and getting into his head, and it just happened. But they accuse him of everything. They throw the book at him, and the whole reckoning is that he's a bad son and a bad person, and this is the absurdism coming into it. The book was a protest in many ways. As I said before, Camus rejected certain aspects of Kierkegaard's existentialist philosophy, especially when he published the myth of Sisyphus. Don't walk ahead, I may not follow. Don't walk behind, I may not lead. Just walk by my side and be my friend. Albert Camus. Thank you.